Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's episode of Fake Accents Unite. Bit of a change of panel this week. I'm joined by Rose of Dawn.
Hi.
I'm joined by Discordia.
Hey there.
And I can see Base Liz has just joined us from the States. How are you?
Hey, doing well, thanks.
You've timed this marvelously as we went live. And you come in just as the introductions are ending, so it's all good. I see I've had my first ever super chat on this channel from Sora Sapien. Thank you very, very much. Lit AF, am I the first super chat ever on this channel? You are indeed, sir. So well done. Andy saying, no Britisher, I'm out in the chat. Sadly, the Britisher is ill and cannot make it this week. But on the other hand, he may have been caused to be ill by something I'm about to show you now, which is a new piece of artwork for the channel, which has been produced by the Ritualist, who you may know from Sargon's D&D streams. So he's produced me this lovely office here, and I've trapped the Britisher within it, as you can see on the right hand side on the shelf.
That is pretty cool. I do like that. So the frame, is that supposed to be like you will just put in random pictures in that?
So I can put whatever I want in there. Hopefully we'll spice things up a little bit. Do any of you recognize this figure here on the left?
I want to say I do, but I'm not that intelligent, so no.
No. This is Diogenes. If you know Diogenes, the first, the first cynic. Now, there's a few Easter eggs here. So we've got Vision of the Anointed over here on the right, which is a book by Thomas Sowell to appease AA's fans. So you've got Dankula was here, which I don't know how that got here on the bottom of the desk. He scratched it whilst Ritualist wasn't looking. And then I thought that there was a collection of books by Plato up here on this second from the top shelf. It turns out that it's a collection of Playboy magazines, which I entirely very progressive of me, supporting the a women's industry. As we go.
I didn't even realize that was a thing for you. I didn't realize you were into Playboy.
I'm really not. It's just a thing.
You've got a whole Wahmen stream here, and you're already showing your sexism.
It's not my sexism. It's supporting women in the industry. Do you realize how much better paid you are?
How do you justify those bookends?
How do I justify? I mean, I hadn't really taken much heed of the bookends, to be perfectly honest. But there you go. Right, there we are. Marvelous. You survived the hurricane, then, Liz?
Yes. Yeah, almost no damage here. It was very nice. I mean, several cities were, I wouldn't say leveled, but got a lot of damage, and they're still recovering. But no, here where I am, we got a lot of rain and some wind. So yeah, it wasn't bad.
I saw some of your streams or attempted streams on the subject.
Yes.
And it looked like Liz goes out on a blustery day and tries not to self-dox. So
yes. Well, yeah, I think I was pretty good, pretty careful with that, not showing any
landmarks or signs.
Yeah. It was just like on your porch, and there was a tree. I tried watching one, and I think it cut out.
Yes, the quality was very bad, but just partly because of the camera, partly because of the internet, just everything. But
you were in like the middle of a storm. I think we can kind of forgive the quality of the camera.
I'd love to do it again. I mean, we get hurricanes every year. It's just that ended up being a big one. Which, if I had known how strong it was going to be, I would have left. Because with hurricanes, if it's category 1, I don't even care. Nobody notices. If it's category 2, then yeah, okay, make sure you have water and bread, whatever else you need. If it's category 3, okay, you need to be prepared. That's going to be a little more serious. And that was the most anybody was expecting. A lot of people were saying, oh no, it's going to be category 2. Some were saying, well, it's looking like it's going to be a category 3. So I was preparing for 3. And then it hit category 4 just before it hit land. I'm like, okay, that's very serious. You need to be careful. Category 5 means evacuate. Just get out. Just don't even stay. And apparently this one did actually hit just the edge of category 5 right before it hit land, which nobody was expecting. So yeah, it ended up being a lot worse than anybody was expecting, but fortunately where I am did not get hit very bad.
We've had some more super chats that have come in the meantime. They've whirled through on the wind. So Sitskoen has donated DKK 50. Now it's Kroner, isn't it? That one. And he says, no empire was ever without blame. The North Sea Empire was. I only wish Britisher was here so I could tell him off for that. You'll bring it up next time, I'm sure. Or if not, I certainly will message him privately when he's in the throes of pain from his flu or whatever. I shall send him that just to make sure he's extra down in the dumps. Silly Sailor donated £2 and says, is the third super chat immoral? That's really for you to decide, but I don't.
That's a very good question, actually. I'm trying to debate whether it is.
I don't think
it depends on your finances, depends on your budget.
Indeed, capitalism, right? And capitalism isn't immoral, really.
That's
Sitskoen donated 20 kroner and said, not as much as the fourth. You know what? You two could keep having this argument through Super Chat if you like. I'm not going to complain.
Definitely. I want to see the conclusion of this argument.
And Harry Englediv donated £2 as well and says, capitalism ho. Although I'm not sure how I should pronounce this because obviously every other letter is capitalized. It's like capitalism ho. Like so. And there we go. I got to have the emphasis in there in the right places, right? People in chat are asking where Sarah is. We did approach Sarah for the stream, but unfortunately that's a royal we. I approached Sarah for this stream, but very sadly she's busy this evening, so she won't be on, but we'll have her on another time, no doubt. No worries. Right. We've got a few articles for us this evening, just to do things. Do we want serious or do we want silly first? That's the question.
Let's go for silly. I'm in a bit of a silly mood at the moment.
Go for silly. Now, I mean, they're all tinged with a hint of seriousness, right? But this one is, in particular, rather a silly article. So, present to everyone, and voila. A London university has called for £100 million in slavery reparations.
Wow, that's going to be successful considering the NUS's campaign for things like, the end to like the war between Israel and Palestine. Look how well that's gone.
Yeah. Well, they seem to believe that lobbying is just the way to get things done to two groups who have a religious war going on, which has been running for a long time. Let's just say. And we've had another super chat from Sora Sapien, who donated £5 and says, "Capitalism ho Akbar." What the relevance of that is, like, capitalism ho is great. That makes perfect sense, of course. But yes, universities in the UK, which benefited in previous centuries from the slave trade, should contribute to a £100 million fund to support ethnic minority students, says a university leader. The chair of the governors for the University of East London. Now, this is obviously interesting to us because it's not a student union calling for it.
Ah.
Right? It's a chair of governors. And he says it would be ethical and right for universities to contribute. And it would help young people who otherwise could not afford to graduate.
But this is not reparations for slavery in that case. Ethnic minority students would include Hispanics who were not enslaved, as far as I know, by the British. It would include, Asians, Middle Eastern, people who had.
They would have.
People who never enslaved.
Anyone who's not white.
Specifically, you'd have to explicitly say it's for Afro-Caribbean people.
It's a very strange place as well because. How far can you say it goes before your university, like how are they going to raise this money? It just comes out of the budget. So either existing black students are paying for this, in which case it's the equivalent of just effectively siphoning money away from actual courses, or it's only white student tuition fees who go into this.
And then the white students are going to go elsewhere, probably.
Which is, well, not even that, right? Because they're not charging an extra amount. Again, it's just like you're effectively, again, siphoning from the courses which are majority white or something. It's like, are you going to take away budgets for learning for the sake of trying to push more people through something which you've siphoned extra money? So
it wouldn't actually work, though, to say classes that are majority white. I mean, isn't England like 90% white or something? I mean,
that's right.
It's quite
overrepresented. So every class is going to be majority white, I would say.
Yeah, like outside of the big cities like London and Birmingham, it's like racially it is very much white. Like I come from North Wales, and there's very, very, very few ethnic minorities around, like in my entire county, like very, very few. So, but I think a lot of people in the big cities, especially somewhere like London, where it is very racially diverse, they would seem to have the idea that, well, this must be what the rest of the country is like, and it really, really isn't. But I think with something like this, part of me is thinking, if the university itself wants to do this with their money, they can go ahead and do it, but they will face the ramifications of doing so. They will end up end up doing themselves a lot of actual damage. And besides, there's already a lot of initiatives at the moment to get more ethnic minority students in. Anyway, there's already lots of these things going on. So, what additional things do they think they will get from doing this initiative?
Yeah. So it's one of those strange things where you go, how much will people care? Because like I'm looking at it and I'm going, the political class is around 15 to 20%, if that. And in students it's much lower. So you wonder how much this would affect genuine students, because most of them they will ignore this. They'll go, I want to go study a course at university. This university looks nice, I'll go there. Rather than going, oh, I'd love to go to this university because it's got good, it's got good retention rates and it's got a good, seems to have a good atmosphere. But they're giving this huge amount of money away to, a cause which seems dubious. I don't think it's going to be that much of a consideration for most people.
It might be, because where are they going to get the money from? They still need to provide the courses and pay the professors. They're going to put tuition fees up.
Yeah, they need to find this money.
So these are far more expensive.
Do these universities, though, get money from the government? I know in the US, most state universities get a lot of money from the government.
So the way universities work in the UK is it all comes from student fees. However, the government effectively runs the student fee program. So the universities sort of collectively, because it's a seller's market, dictate the cost of tuition. And there is a cap on the amount that they can charge by the government, and funnily enough, they all charge the cap, irrespective of ranking or whatever. Which naturally is, I believe at the moment this year it's 9,250, and it's going up year on year, but in line with inflation, or so I'm told. But so in effect, they are government financed because very few people choose to self-fund. And it may as well be government funded. Anyway, so Glasgow University announced that up to around 200 million in today's value had been donated in the 19th century by people who had profited from the slave trade. And so it has announced a reparative justice program. I will point out this 100 million pound fund isn't coming from a single university. They're calling on many universities to contribute to it, including creating a centre for the study of slavery and a memorial to the enslaved.
Which leads into the second question there. When you say they are calling for it, who is they, and are they going to be working at this the study for slavery? A center for the study of slavery. I mean, you're going to have employees there.
Yeah, you wonder, don't you? They're effectively creating their own industry in this regard. You wonder who's doing this and whether or not it's more opportunistic than they're perhaps letting on.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It seems like someone has come up with effectively a new course, and what better way to get recognition of this course and kind of get the hype building by calling for reparations, particularly if it's one which is revolving around slavery. It's a really good way of promoting it.
Mr. Thompson, who is the I believe the guy who has proposed this £100 million fund, said there should be this collective university fund because in the wake of the Windrush scandal, it was prescient, ethical, and right to seize this historic opportunity to invest in those who cannot afford or cannot see themselves graduating with a life-changing qualification. Now, I don't understand this at all, because any student who goes into the university system in the UK can apply for student finance.
Mm-hmm.
Any student who is unable to afford, living conditions and university tuition, that is all paid for them, and they get a generous amount on top. Now, I live in London, and you can receive up to around £11,500 a year if you meet the right criteria in order to live up here, and that is on top of having your tuition fees paid. University accommodation costs something like around let's say £130 a week. So it really and most of the, because a full-time course in the UK is really a part-time course, because it's 14 or 15 hours plus study time, and then most students obviously get part-time job on top of that. There is no way that they'll be hurting in terms of that. The majority of England's and the UK's black and minority ethnic students live in cities, primarily London, and in this case, it's going to ultimately benefit a very specific London-centric small minority, as it were, of people who already are going to get the maximum amount of government support that they need for a loan, which you don't need to pay back until you earn over a certain amount.
21,000 a year it is.
Yeah, above the just under the national average, and which gets written off if you can't pay back in 20 years. So I just don't understand the point of this, because what they're saying is it's ethical and it's right to give people an opportunity they already have.
Mm.
At the detriment of your
they
school.
wouldn't be getting in would be not making the grades, in which case throwing money is not going to help. Unless you're throwing money at schools to get them better grades.
Well, I don't see... everyone ignore this article on the right, by the way. We're not
I've been looking at it for the past 10 minutes. I'm kind of curious.
Maybe we'll go there. There's no talk about like affirmative action style policy. So it's literally just if you're black in the UK, you go to university for free, by the looks of things.
I don't think 100 million would cover all the blacks in the UK, unless you
I doubt it. But then it's talking about the proportion who go to university as well. I don't think 100 million is going to be that much. As you say, it's a bit of a virtue signal, but at the same time, I think it would affect a great many people.
I think ultimately, if that's something they want to do, then they can go ahead and do it. But people shouldn't necessarily be forced into doing it.
You also have to look at again the idea that slavery still affects us today, and that sort of thing. And
I was about to say that this could also be in order to set a precedent. It may not be necessarily whoever is the pushers behind this may not be thinking about this. They may be thinking much broader, more long term, and thinking this is the first step. If we can get people to accept this and get behind it, then one more step, one more step, one more step.
So you think that eventually they would push it up to a government level?
Oh, absolutely. They're already trying to push it up to a government level. I mean, that's exactly what this is. I think they're taking some inspiration from your side of the pond, Liz. In the United States, there have been arguments over how to reconcile universities with historic links to slavery and slave owning. And
we've had those arguments for the last 150 years. That's nothing new.
Georgetown University has given extra support in its admissions process to the descendants of a group of slaves sold by the university in the 19th century. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with this.
I think that's a bit different because they're explicit, because there is that connection there. Like, these are people who's they're not. These people themselves weren't directly affected, but their ancestors. There's a bit more of a gesture in it.
The argument is it's a cascading effect, whereby because the this group of people were slaves at that point, and the university was responsible for them, then this has directly affected their socioeconomic growth over time, and that's why, let's say, that group of people is poorer now than they should be. I don't buy that.
That's not true.
No, it's not true. I don't buy it. But that's the logic which no doubt they're using. And again, you have to ask for a policy like this. How long does it run? Do you offer, to the point where you then have a group of very wealthy black families and that are, all university educated and very, very wealthy from, going into higher income graduate jobs, and then and their children are still going to university for free because
I see that.
And it's a strange one as well because am I right in thinking that it's all self-funded in the US, Liz, typically?
Which?
As in your universities, you pay for them, like out of your own pocket.
I mean, you would get grants, wouldn't you?
It's very twisted, but there are a lot of scholarships available, a lot of grants, and a tremendous number of student loans, which, yes, you do have to pay back the student loan. So if you end up paying for it through student loans or working your way through, then yes, you pay for it eventually. Student loans cannot be forgiven. So even if you declare bankruptcy in the US, which means all debts are just declared null and void, you don't have to pay them anymore because you just say, I have no assets, I have no job, I have no income, therefore, and you go to court. Student loans cannot be written off, even if you declare bankruptcy. So if you have a student loan, you have to pay it back no matter what happens.
Is there a thing like in the UK where you only start paying it off after when you're earning a certain amount?
You start paying as soon as you graduate.
Wow.
Yep.
So I mean, it depends. Like, if it's anything like it was for me, and I graduated uni, it took me a good couple of months to get my first job.
Mm-hmm. It's the college system in America is so messed up, and I tell most young people here, don't go to college. Just don't go to trade school. It's not worth it. Most college degrees in America, at least, are completely useless. You'll come out of it massively in debt with no job prospects. Go to trade school. You'll only pay a couple $1,000s for the entire education, and you'll come out with a lot of job prospects.
One of the great I guess failings of society recently was to devalue. We used to have a thing called polytechnics in the UK, which ran alongside trade schools. I think we now call them, we have sort of vocational colleges instead. But basically, we pushed down trade skills. We said we're a service sector now, and we don't do trades really that much. Apprenticeships were basically shelved, and everyone was pushed to go to university. Of course, it's the borrowing culture again, and this debt, and of course this led to the crop up of loads of relevant and redundant university programs, which would be in a more balanced society something which only the passionate would pay for, and it would be private tutorage effectively, or small, private, like a school for such a thing, where as opposed to the government funding, which you can get for running a course, which is insane. And we just pushed everything down. We're now getting to the point where apprenticeships are coming back because we have such a deficit in trade schools, and an overrepresentation of graduates, which leads to sort of a strange effect on the market where graduates are going, you basically need a minimum level of graduate qualification to get certain jobs, and other jobs are going, universities don't teach you critical thinking properly anymore, or you may have one of these useless degrees and therefore your degree is useless to us.
Well, when I got my degree, it's only ever helped me once, and that was to get a receptionist job, and I didn't even get the receptionist job. That's the only time it's ever even been mentioned by a potential employer. And that was like 3 years of my life seriously, going to university was probably like my biggest regret in my life. It just caused nothing but debt.
I don't think that anyone should go to university unless they the only reason I have gone back into education and to university is because one, I have a passion for the subject and I'm going to actually study it, unlike about 60% of my classmates. But secondly, it's the only way to get an accreditation. So in order to go along my career path, you must be accredited by the British Psychological Society in order to continue progressing along that path.
Yeah. But see, you're doing it for a specific reason, though. Like the way in which this is being pushed on people as young as 18. I remember being told by the deputy head of my sixth form that you need to go to uni. Make sure you're going to university. You won't get a job if you don't go to uni because everybody else is doing it. So it pushes you into doing courses where it's not going to affect you at all. Originally, I was doing a degree in international politics. I ended up dropping out of it because I was dealing with personal issues and people on the course were calling me a Nazi. But then I went back and...
Thanks for demonetizing my stream there. Carry
on.
Take
back the super chats.
I've got a few of those. I need to go through them in a minute. But go on.
To clarify, I wasn't a Nazi, but I was a bit more conservative at the time, and I was on a course doing international politics, and there was a lot of communists on my course. But anyway, but then I went back. I did a IT degree, despite the fact that I know nothing about computers. I managed to get a 2-2, so I was happy with that. But then that's, I've forgotten everything that I learned. It's not helped me. I can't get an IT job with it. It was a complete waste of time. And I would say if anyone on this stream is thinking of going to uni, only go if you know exactly what you want to do and why.
Yes.
And if you study the job market to make sure that you can actually get a job in that industry. I mean, I have a friend who he went into law school because he wanted to be a lawyer and he knew that lawyers make lots of money. The problem is that's been the case for quite a while. So right now, the law market in the US is oversaturated. There are far more lawyers than there are law positions. So he's thinking, oh, this is going to be a great job. This is what I want to do. And I'll make good money. And he can't find a job.
Yeah, really tough. You really have to analyze, and if you're going to do something for a passion, again, you have to square that with the realistic expectations and what your second plan would be in the event that you didn't get that.
Everyone I know who went straight from school to university and didn't do a year in industry really regret not doing that year in industry. Because you come out, you've got these. This qualification, but you've got no life experience. No life experience, no job experience, no experience in industry. You just basically as if you're coming out of school, but you have a piece of paper.
And you tend to have a bit of a chip on your shoulder as well. There's a real problem. So one of the paths that you can take in the psychology discipline is occupational psychology, which is looking at workplaces, basically, and going into workplaces and trying to work out the best ways of running them and changing, sort of office atmospheres and so on and so forth. Now, it's very lucrative because what you're effectively doing is you're trying to bring up the efficiency of the company and nowadays trying to make it somewhere which people want to go to work as well. It's a pleasant working environment, because the general cultural consensus at the moment is happy workers are more productive. Not necessarily the case, interestingly, but anyway, I digress. In order to get a job in occupational psychology, you probably work something similar to a management consultant, and you need to have probably 3 to 5 years industry work in the particular field in which you're going to go into to improve, in order to have basically any credentials as someone who's going to be able to make an effect in that industry. And that's one of those things which people don't understand, is like, in order to make the money, you need to have networked, you need to have connections, you probably need to have a second degree in that case. So occupational psychology, if you wanted to do anything marginally profitable, which is probably engineering, then you need to have a master's in engineering alongside that, and you need to have worked for 4 or 5 years in industry. It's very difficult,
Yeah, that's a bit full on.
and it's something which people don't appreciate. And you go, but they look at the end result and they go, going into workplaces, making them more productive, earn over 100K a year. Yeah, that's great. And you go, you have to work for yourself, so you have to find your own work, unless you want to sacrifice a lot of your rate for a company, and then you need all this extra stuff on top, and you're just not prepared to do that, are you? Joe Bloggs, who has just found this presentation. Going on to back to the super chats, because I'm aware I've had quite a few of them. Joe Neverton has donated £2. Says De Britta is ill again, the sick brain of Europe. As I said on Twitter, he occasionally gets a bit of brain rot, and he needs to regenerate for a few days. It's one of those things. Joel Kelly donated £2 and says, I'm part Irish. I want 800 years of reparations. I can tell you're Irish because you spelt reparations incorrectly. Thank you very much for that donation, sir. Good grief. Tim Cornish donated $24.99 through Super Chat and said, this channel Super Chat worthy long ago. Question, is even thinking of the third biscuit immoral? Because AA would say it's a sign of weakness. So are we even allowed to consider and think about the third biscuit? We are, in fact, because thinking about the biscuit risks being offensive, right? In order to think, you've got to risk being offensive, and the third biscuit is definitely offensive. Says that. JW Culp donated $2. Thank you, sir. And says, hose equals pure capitalism. I don't know if I'd call guests hoes, but thank you very much for your donation.
I doubt that's what he meant.
No, I'm sure he didn't.
And by the way, it's not pure capitalism if it's being taxed.
It's true. 30%. It's 30% through Super Chat.
It's not what I meant. Okay.
No, I know.
Moving on.
Joe Neverton donated £2 and says, Britain deserves reparations because France started it. I mean, we have got the what was it? The oyster, not the oyster wars. What we have in the channel at the moment?
It's the fish.
Scallop wars. Yeah, it's definitely the French's fault. That it's quite interesting actually. Most people these days consider that sort of European unity to be kind of a given, and they don't seem to realise that we've been at war with the French more than any other country, probably. Over the course of our entire time, we had competing empires at one point and all sorts. So,
didn't you have 100-year-long war with them?
Something like that, yes. But you'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if you could meet anyone around my age who could tell you much about the 100-Year War, even if unless they were a historian. So,
well, I mean, the Americans made a movie about it that I'm sure was totally inaccurate. Yeah,
it sounds like something the Americans would do.
Yes, Hollywood.
Sora Sapien donated £10. Thank you very much, sir. It says, painting the blue waves red. We're painting the blue waves red. We dare not gloat or waste our vote. So let the red pills be spread. We're painting the blue waves red. We're painting the blue waves red. Nobody clip that. Thank you very much.
I was hoping you would sing along to that.
I don't know the tune. So
it's from Alice in Wonderland. We're painting the roses red. Painting the roses red.
I can't.
We'll lose our head.
It's been a very long time since I've watched any version of Alice in Wonderland. But thank you for that. Thank you. They say. Moving swiftly on, Joe Neverton donated £2 and said, British education was envied by the world once. Yes, I've been listening to a lot of Peter Hitchens over the last couple of days. My God, the man is depressing. But at the same time, he raises a few points. I need to call his office on Tuesday. That's tomorrow. In fact, in order to try and arrange an interview with him. Should be fun. Yes, we were envied by the world. In fact, it was considered that we almost had more American students than British students over here because the Americans had such a high opinion of our education system. Sutsgoen donated 100 kroner and says, big city people want more money for themselves. Quick, act surprised. Complimentary burn Brussels and remove the Reich comment. Time for whiskey and to sit back and enjoy the show. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, Sutsgoen. And take care. Yes, that was going. How on earth did we get onto, the state of... I did have something I wanted to say about apprenticeships before we moved on, actually, which is that my old local council, which I won't name for the sake of doxing, basically offered a program in order to become a computer programmer for effectively free, and you were on an apprenticeship rate, so you were being paid something like £2.40 an hour or something to do it, and you would work in industry effectively for a couple of years, and then you'd be considered qualified, and you'd go on and you'd have the equivalent of a degree level qualification in computer science. And it was rallied against by people who don't seem to have an idea about what debt is, because they were saying, oh, this is terrible, like people can't afford to live off £2, or whatever, an hour. And you just go, well, let's face it here. Most students or most people in the area who are going to be applying for this job already live with their parents. It's aimed at student level people who are considering going to university, at 18-year-olds in effect. And you're offering them a degree level qualification in the same period of time as it takes to get a degree level qualification at no cost, and in fact, where you make a profit. So it's very strange to me that people would rally against this as a thing, but it shows how disconnected people are from the idea of apprenticeships today in the UK anyway. If you want to make money, as you say, Liz, go into a trade. I've never met a poor tradesman. I've met many of them with broken knees or with bad backs, but I've never met a poor one. They tend to do quite well in today's industry, certainly, particularly with the housing issue we've got over here, where they will just pay people to put up houses all the time. So it's very worth doing. But it just seems to be one of those things that never gets brought up as a viable option at, say, college, which is I don't know what equivalent of that is for you, Liz, but so the period between 16 and 18.
That's high school.
High school for you then, yeah. So in high school, they bring up this idea that, unless you're actually already doing a trade, sort of 15, 16, and training for it, you never get brought up the idea of apprenticeships. Again, it never comes up because most of the people who are teaching sort of A-level subjects, as we call them, are, I guess, already academically pushing for that university side of things, rather than going, you've got a maths qualification, an A-level in maths or whatever, why don't you apply that to being an electrician or something like that. But we seem to have this weird social stigma around tradespeople. It's kind of quite us and them-ish.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's something I've noticed.
We have the same thing here.
But that's which is quite. I think it's quite sad, really. As
yes,
I know a great many, good people on either side of the social divide. So at the end of this article, we've got one line which I just thought was hilarious, which says that the university has ended the use of the word master in academic titles because of the connotations of slavery.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
So you just go, if you cannot discriminate between mastery of a subject or mastery of anything, because it's a trigger warning before you get called you're a master of engineering or whatever.
Wow.
So what do you, because you can do a master's degree, so what's that being changed to? Or do you still do a master's degree that you can't be called a master?
It seems to be Harvard, so I don't know how it works over there. I don't know. Do you have master's?
Is that a link? Yes, we have master's degrees. Is that a link?
Let's have a click,
let's see what they changed it to.
Where this rabbit hole is. Harvard abolishes master in titles amid slavery.
Wait, Harvard, that's US.
Yes, it is.
Faculty deans.
Oh, okay, right. So house masters and that sort of thing. It's not getting rid of the master's degree.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was going to say they have not gotten rid of the master's degree over here.
I was going to say
it will not affect other uses of master's, such as master's level degree. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a misleading. So what did the other article say? The other article basically misquoted this.
The media, in academic titles, but it's not academic. It's sort of it's a misrepresentation. But then the media do clickbait. I'd never, right? So there's that sort of thing. Lovely. We've had one more super chat from Skone, who donated 100 krona, and says, Denmark versus Sweden, 900 years of killing one another, and that's only while we called ourselves kingdoms. Even before that, we hated one another brotherly. We just had to beat you about the French. Okay. Fair enough. You can hate the Swedes and the Denmark can hate the Swedes just as much as the English hate the French. I'm sure it's fine. It's not really a competition, you know. I mean, we just call them cheese-eating surrender monkeys nowadays, even though we fully understand the fact that if you were a nation which was losing over 30,000 troops a day, you'd probably consider backing down as well.
You have to ask, what are you doing wrong?
Yes, basically. Basic technological advantage, typically. The shareholders are displeased with me. I have no idea. So on to our next article, which is disconnected, but there you go. Most of these articles, by the way, have come from what was supposed to be not so newsworthy this week. But unfortunately, I had some very bad news, as I say, on Friday. I found out a friend of mine had died, and so understandably, I was a bit busy. But I did still do some research, so that's why I won't let the chat sort of... I won't leave you waiting for it, basically. I'm trying to find my words right now. I haven't eaten in a while, so excuse me for that. I just call them Swedes. Right. So a woman was convicted in Austria. She did 2 lectures back in 2011, or before then even, basically talking about Islam, and said that Muhammad liked to do it with children. And she was convicted by the Vienna Regional Criminal Court for making this statement. So she's appealed to several courts, ended up in the highest court in the land, the European Convention on Human Rights, and they said no, this doesn't. That you're being convicted for calling Muhammad a paedophile does not breach her right to free speech. Basically,
well, I mean, I just playing devil's advocate slightly.
This is why you're here, Liz.
Saying he liked to do it with children is not necessarily accurate. We don't know.
No.
We know he married one underage girl and yes, had sex with her when she was 9 years old. So yes, he was a pedophile. Yes, he had sex with a minor. But to the best of my knowledge, we only know that he did it with one girl. We have no evidence that he liked to do it with children.
So what she should have said is like to do it with child.
With a child.
With a child.
Yes. If she said
with a child,
that would be fine. But saying with children, that implies that he did it with many children, or at least lusted after many children, which is possible. But as far as I know, we have no evidence of that. Yes, he was a pedophile, but from what I've heard, we only have evidence that he had one child bride.
Fair enough. I also don't obviously know the context of what she said in these specific lectures, and how much of it was just general spurgery like Liz has just outlined. But on the other hand, it is not inaccurate to call him a paedophile.
Yes.
In general, right? Just due to this specific case.
It's just that if you use things that are not true, then it defeats your entire case. If you say he was a pedophile, he raped little boys, it's like, well, you can't prove that, so now everybody's going to disbelieve everything you said, even though what you said is half true. Absolutely.
So we have to be very careful on this.
Yes.
But she also reportedly said a 56-year-old and a 6-year-old. What do we call it if not paedophilia?
Yeah, that's not in any way a controversial statement.
I don't think so either. There's something to be said. I mean, at the point at which he married a 6-year-old or whatever was betrothed, you can make the argument that he had to do that out of honor or something, but then it's the consummation that's the issue as well. Like that's a huge issue. Anyway, but she was convicted for disparaging religious doctrines.
Which is a blasphemy law.
And ordered her to pay a fine of €480 and legal fees, which is quite a lot.
And you think about how Ireland's just got rid of their blasphemy laws, and here's the EU basically making up a new one. That's entirely what that is, disparaging religious doctrine. You're speaking out against it. It's a blasphemy law in all but name. Yes, and now here is the sort of the most controversial paragraph, in my opinion. So it says, on Thursday, the ECHR said, the court found in particular that domestic courts comprehensively assessed the wider context of the applicant's statements and carefully balanced her right to freedom of expression with the right of others to have their religious feelings protected. No.
religious feeling.
No, you do not have the right to not be offended. That is not a right.
And serve the legitimate aim of preserving religious peace in Austria. Now, like, for a start, there is no right to have your religious feelings protected.
No.
No,
Right.
you have the right to believe what you want, but
exactly.
Yes.
people don't have to accept it.
And there's one thing to be said for preserving peace, but at what cost? And is that cost going to be, in effect, the truth? Now, if they were finding her specifically over, as Liz says, he liked to do it with kids. You know, if the whole tone of her thing was like that, then it's I can understand that she might be fined for that. But it's this statement of why they've done it being this, which just opens the field up for precedent.
Yeah,
which is the issue.
If that was passed, say in the UK, then anyone who sells Monty Python videos would have to be jailed.
Mm.
I mean,
absolutely,
he made fun of Christian, even when he was still. I saw an interview just after The Secret Life of Brian came out. I mean, obviously, I saw a taped interview. I wasn't there, but when Malcolm Muggeridge, one of the bishops, and one of the guys who does Monty Python, I can't think of his name, but he's the guy that's been in the news lately. The three of them talking, and the two Christian guys saying, "We don't want this video banned. We just think you shouldn't have made it. We think it's offensive, and we think it was wrong for you to do. It's just rude. It's essentially spitting in people's faces, but we don't believe it should be banned." And he's like, no, there's nothing wrong with making it. So it was interesting, even watching it, neither of them ever wanted it banned. They just said he shouldn't have made it.
It was actually banned in Aberystwyth, though. In fact, it was banned. I think it was the only place in the UK that actually banned it. And the ban was only lifted after, I believe it was the mayor of Aberystwyth actually appeared in Life of Brian. And she ended up like kind of lifting the ban so she could show the film. I think it was more about public, like obviously you could watch it in your own home, but it's more about playing it in public.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very weird kind of rule, and it's like one of the only ones in it like that in the UK.
Mm-hmm. If you say you're not allowed to offend people's religious feelings, a lot of the Monty Python's videos were very offensive to Christians, but I know of very, very few Christians who would want them banned. They don't want to see them, and they kind of wish that they hadn't been made. And it's like, I don't like it, and I wish people wouldn't do that. But they're not going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't be allowed to." They would just say,
you would get people who would do that, but then these voices. I think it's because we're so used to we've been a predominantly Christian nation, whether it's like the UK or the USA.
USA still is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we kind of understand a bit more that Christianity is a spectrum, whereas when it comes to, say, a more minority voice, and the loudest ones are the ones who effectively control the conversation, it's a lot harder to kind of hear anything but that. And you find that with a lot of minority voices. I mean, like how I talk about the trans community all the damn time, and it's a very similar thing where you have loud ass people announcing all sorts of things, and you have to follow what they say. And it is a similar thing when you have things like, say, for example, what's happened now with Mohammed. There's probably a lot of Muslims who, they might be personally offended, but I don't think loads of them will be calling for it to be banned per se. But because you have the most loudmouth ones talking about this, that's what the narrative sounds like.
Yeah, it will be that to a degree, I think. But the other thing, I guess, is it depends, because the Islamic community in particular as well are very much united, I guess, behind whatever their mufti is.
Right.
So whatever his opinion is tends to be the way that the population goes. But I don't know enough about it to make further comment than that. The idea of religious, again, it's the miracle of free choice in a society where it's like I wouldn't choose to watch The Human Centipede, right?
I didn't know such a thing exists.
Because
it does. It's as bad as it sounds.
It's just I just find it rubbish.
It's just
it was one of those films that was hilarious in its own way.
It's hilarious to kind of hear the actual, like, the concept of it, but there's just awkward. No. It's really awkward film. And ew.
Yeah, just a very gross film, right? But it's not something I'd watch. It offends my sensibilities, and I wouldn't watch it. At the same time, I wouldn't prevent it from being made, or people who happen to enjoy that kind of thing for whatever reason from watching it, as much as I might disapprove. I just don't see the value in that.
Right.
See, that's the difference between you and AA. If he was in charge, he would ban the third biscuit.
The third centipede. AA is an interesting character. I don't know exactly where he's going at the moment. The difficulty I have with him is he's very well read, and so it's really irritating when I go, because I haven't read exactly what he's read, I can't necessarily disprove it because I haven't read the counter arguments to his thing, and therefore I can't formulate my own counter arguments because I also haven't read exactly what he's read. So there we go.
You don't have to. People will say that, oh, you haven't read the book. I don't need to read the book. I think of it. My dad used to tell us a story of when you want to people who work at banks, if they want to recognize counterfeits, they don't study counterfeits. What they do is study real money. They'll hold it, feel it, smell it, just look at it, and to where they immediately recognize if something is not real because they're so used to what is real. So that's one thing he taught us. You don't have to study all the lies out there. All you have to do is study the truth, and you'll immediately recognize when something is not true.
It's true enough. Do you think AA is an authoritarian, Liz?
Yes, he admitted that. Oh, he and I were having a Twitter debate, and he finally admitted. He's like, "All right, I admit I'm an authoritarian. I'm sorry." I'm like, "Thank you." And that was the end of the argument.
No wonder he got kicked off. There you go.
Those tweets.
There you go. I love how there's probably people in the chat who don't know who AA is. He's the academic agent. He's worth checking out. But there you go. Before you think we're talking about some Alcoholics Anonymous group,
I think that he likes libertarian economics. I will say that he likes the idea of libertarianism, but at heart, no, he is definitely an authoritarian.
Yeah,
he loves the idea of he loves the idea of there being basically no state to impede him. At the same time, he's like, a state is kind of necessary, and at the other end of it, he's just like, I want to enforce my will. So there you go. It's like, what would you see? And it's hard to know sometimes how much is man and how much is meme.
Yes,
at some points.
It's just like how he comes out with all sorts of random facts as well. Like when we were on Unpopular Opinions last week, I was just surprised at the amount he knows about gangster rap. When he
it is his favorite. It is his favorite genre. But this is not going to be an episode talking about the academic agent. Otherwise, he'll get far too big for his own boots there. So, moving back to our story, as we were going along, right? Here we are. So, basically, her statements were considered as going beyond the permissible limits of an objective debate, and by classifying them as an abusive attack on the Prophet of Islam, which could stir up prejudice and threaten religious peace. Again, I wonder, and this article is really poor at this, whether or not it's specifically that she went on a tirade, basically about, and had inaccurate statements in there, or whether or not it was just because she stated the fact that he was a paedophile. She claimed that her criticism of Islam occurred in the framework of an objective and lively discussion, which contributed to the public debate and had not been aimed at defaming him, just sort of that sort of thing. So, very strange. Obviously, the comments are on point. That is one ugly courthouse. That makes people there. But peace at any price, not entirely successful historically, indeed. But you just think, like, how much more do you crack down? Oh, you can't, unless you identify as being Islamic, then you can't talk about it. I mean, we've already got people like the Imam of Peace who won't be debated in his own circles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you ever seen anything by Imam of Peace?
Yes, I have actually.
Because
I've seen one.
He was on V's stream not too long ago. It's really funny because I don't think he's used to talking to people he actually agrees with. or people who are actually interested in what he has to say, rather than attacking him or making defamatory statements. Because
he must get attacked a lot.
All the time. He gets death threats every day, and he just. But he's got a very aggressive manner, and when he's asked a question, he is almost accusatory in the way that he comes back. He's got really good. It makes him really good delivery when he's actually having to defend himself and attack, but it's quite wearing when V, for instance, is there just trying to ask him questions about this and that, and he's just going, this is the way it's going to be, because it's like,
I might have to watch that stream. I must have missed it.
Yeah, I was meaning to catch it, so I'm gonna have to watch that. That sounds a bit weird.
It's pretty good. He's got a very good he has a great Twitter profile though, I think. Very sort of mixture of passive aggressive and outright sort of sass. So that's quite there we go. Let me see. I'm just browsing the last couple of articles, you see, because there's some stuff which is just worth talking about and some stuff which isn't. Some stuff's out of date. So we've got. Here we go. Apparently, we're going to change the British pension. That's going to change, but that sounds boring, so we're not going to talk about that. So,
is that the equivalent of our Social Security?
Yes. Well, it's pension is payments. It's effectively saving for retirement. And you get payments at the end. You can choose. You never used to be able to, but you can now choose when your pension comes when you retire, and you claim your pension. You either claim a state pension or a private pension, typically, and you get either a lump sum, or you choose to purchase an annuity, which is where you.
I studied insurance. I know what an annuity is.
Okay, fair enough. So at least I don't used to do that.
I wouldn't worry too much. By the time we get to that age, the retirement age will probably be longer than the life expectancy. So there'll be no need to worry about the pensions.
Maybe. So, here's a question to pose to you lot. What is it like for a woman who is harassed? Do you get harassed?
I do, yeah. I kind of do. I mean, the other day I was like just in town and I was just walking down the street, and then there's this guy who like just started smiling at me. It's quite a weird, really creepy. Yeah, in a really creepy, but it's a really creepy smile. And then he comes over to me and he's like trying to talk to me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go meet some friends, whatever. And then he just started following me, and he was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna follow you. And I was just like, fuck off. And then he did. It was weird. Like yeah, that is something which actually happened on Saturday.
Ooh.
So yeah, it does happen.
I have to make a minor correction. The state pension is £155 a week, and it's universal if you've made 40 years of national insurance contributions. So I've been thoroughly put in my place by Hephaestus Forge there. But yeah, so this article, I noticed it. I haven't read it yet, but I am curious because it's quite an inflammatory headline, just straight away. And I think I read the first paragraph and I thought, well, I do want to talk a little bit about this. So it says, what would you do if someone shouted lewd remarks or exposed themselves to you as you walk down the street? Well, if they shouted lewd remarks, you'd either shout back or you'd just go, dickhead.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone exposed themselves to me, I'd call the police.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that, because where I used to live, I mean, I didn't see, I wasn't in when this apparently happened, but we had some police come to the door, and they were like, did a strange man come to your door and, like, flash, because he's been going around all the houses and just flashing anyone that opens the door.
There are some strange people in this world. I mean, there really are.
And I just burst out laughing, and the police was just looking at me like, it's not funny. And I'm like, it kind of is.
You wonder, like, how prevalent flashing is, because it's so unintuitive a particular thing. Like there is no, what are people going to do? Go very nice and then move on or whatever. Instantly throw themselves at you.
People do that for the reaction.
Yeah,
it's a shock.
It's entirely
thing.
for the reaction.
Yes. I was on the deep lore the other day when people were telling jokes, and somebody told this joke that it was so dumb. It was just so dumb, and I said, "Is that supposed to be funny?" And they're like, "Oh, it's great. You tell it, and then look at the reactions. It's so funny." And I'm like, "No, because it's so offensive." I'm like, "It's not even offensive. It's just stupid." But yeah, some people will just they just want the reaction, and they just laugh at the reaction. It's like, what you're doing is.
I could just imagine you, Liz, being completely nonchalant about this.
Probably would be. I'd just be like, "Are you trying to get a reaction?" Well, I know that we're trying to get a reaction.
I mean, you can either do that, or you can point and laugh. That's always a good.
That's my.
Really, was I supposed to notice something?
You poor person.
I would be very mean, I'm sure.
Oh,
of course. You don't just flash your genitals at people. It's just not the done thing. But anyway, it's what many women have to endure. Now, I have been flashed in a park in London.
What?
And it's just like a random old geezer in a coat and nothing else. And you just go.
Was he in one of those stereotypical trench coats?
No, so unfortunately not. So it wasn't pure mean. But you didn't
get the full experience.
But you just go. It's just one of those weird things that happens from a nuts person. That happens, and it doesn't happen. It's not like you going out every day. If you're going out every day and people are flashing you, you've got to. Something's probably up. Right, something's going on. You're frequenting weird parts of town, or you have a non-existent police presence, which I wouldn't put past some boroughs. But it's what many women have to endure. Right, this is a gendered issue. Okay, and MPs are calling for the government to take action to clamp down on street harassment. Maybe we'll go to that link later. But anyway, some people can't imagine this sort of thing happening to them, but others have come forward, revealing their experience of feeling vulnerable in public for many years. So we've got this one, which says flashed at age 10, which is a story from Ruth of Kent, who's in her 60s, and recalls a litany of harassment since childhood, and says, these days I'm not noticed by anyone, but when I was a child, there was always unwanted attention. A man flashed at me age 10. A man selling ice cream groped me age 11, and another man exposed himself to her 2 years later and grabbed her dog at the same time. I mean, I don't think he was flashing you, dear. I think he was after something a bit more bestial. But that's a bit gross, isn't it, really?
Damn it.
Yes. So this goes, those things don't ever leave you, she said. Now, that's gross, right? I will point out...
It's also not true that it doesn't ever leave you.
Also true, but it's also the 60s, which is a very particular period of time, right? Because it's the 60s and 70s. She's 60 now, in her 60s now, which I can only assume. I'm going to assume she's 65, and so I'm going when she's about 10. It's going to be late 60s, early 70s.
Isn't it telling that the only example they could find to print was from like 50 years ago?
Exactly. Right. And you just go, right, okay, so that was a pretty sexist society. If you look back at Mad Men, sort of is a good representation of that sort of thing. And the attitude towards women, and we weren't living in CCTV nation then. And sensibilities were also different, and we were in the post-war free love, everyone being around each other, sexual revolution side of things. So is it any wonder that we had sort of a conflagrance of that sort of thing at that time? And you just go, and she goes, she used to commute when she was a teenager and remembers men rubbing up against her. If the carriage was full, men would press up against me. And if it was empty, there was a potential of being harassed if you're on your own. So men aren't going up and pressing themselves against her when a carriage is empty, right? I commute into sort of central London, a few times a week, and the central line, when it's busy, is absolutely jam-packed, and you can't help
everyone's
but be rubbed up against, or rub up against people accidentally, but also
you can have I went to school where they had buses that would go around campus to take people to and from, and the buses would get so packed. You couldn't move. You're pressed up against people. Your whole body against several people, and it was normal.
That's what the London Underground is in rush hour.
And it's exactly right. And you go, okay, so this is another thing. Also, if you look at the, I mean, today in particular, and I noticed this the other day because I as I say, I read this bit, and so when I was commuting, I took stock of the tube, and I was like, most men are quite happy rubbing up against other men.
Yeah.
As it were, they'll press up together. Whereas a woman, she usually gets a little bit of space. Although that's not even necessarily due to practicality or whatever, or politeness. It's due to the fact that a woman usually has a bag, which is sort of a buffer zone, right, between that.
And it's never a rucksack either. It's always a handbag, because that is the polite way of doing it. It's the men who have the big bulky backpacks who come on the tube on rush hour, and then their bag takes up like more space than they do. And
I'll have to disagree with you a little bit. I mean, I see more of a mix nowadays. But yes, I know what you're saying.
I'm being sexist.
No, of course you are. Just identify as one or the other, and on any given day, and then you can say I'm conveying my lived experience. But yeah, so you've got this thing. So if a carriage is full, men will press up against me. It's like, people will press up against you in a full carriage. I'm sorry. And if it was empty, there's the potential of being harassed if you're on your own. I've got so many mates who went into empty carriages on their own and got mugged because they were stupid and didn't go into a carriage with other people. And if the carriage is somewhat empty and you get some creepy guy who comes over to you and starts being a nuisance, more likely than not, someone's going to step in and go, leave her alone. Right? Even if she doesn't stand up and go, leave me alone, and doesn't have the confidence to do it. It's just not something which happens today, right? And it's just really bizarre that they've taken all these examples from 50 years ago as if it's representative of today. And I think it's
like, it's rampant today, but the only example we could find, it mentions up until her teens and then stops. There's no examples in like the last 40 or 50 years here.
Well, I'm sure there are examples, and harassment does happen, but it's about societal acceptance and prevalence. So that's the key. We have had a super chat from Joel Kelly, who says Liz should have casually shot that Joker. Thank you very much, sir.
I don't think you should get the death penalty for flashing someone.
You are in favor of the death penalty, are you, Liz?
Yes, only in specific cases, though.
Interesting. I'm sure we'll come back to that another time. I am just going to quickly smash out this last super chat, which says, since Goen donated 20 krona, thank you very much, sir. It says, AA is a sleeper communist. His work ethic reveals it. Entirely possible. But didn't hear it from me. No, I don't think he's a communist in any way, shape, or form. But yes, so we've got this example here of Ruth, who unfortunately had some bad experiences back in a bad period.
Did you notice the last paragraph there?
Oh.
Go on.
I just see the next victim's even older.
Oh yeah. Don't get me started. We will move on. Don't worry.
Women don't think about rubbing their bodies against men. It's a societal thing. Like, we're a lesser sex. Okay, girls. How many girls have you heard talk about how much they would love to rub up against, different men?
If you go into nightclubs, you can see women grinding against men.
Yes.
Like, after they've had a few drinks and they see a guy they like, and they're just like rubbing themselves against him as they're dancing.
Yeah.
It's also careful. Don't stimulate the chat too much.
Sorry, chat.
No, it's also one of those funny things where men are very physically stimulated, and none of them are going to complain about rubbing against men. But
I've seen very little complaining.
But also, you're going.
My brothers don't like it when girls do it to them, unless it's a girl who's especially attractive or something.
Fair enough. But it's also this thing where, like, in the carriage scenario, for instance, like, women don't think about rubbing against men, but they do, and vice versa. It's one of those things which is just sort of the necessity of all being squeezed like sardines in a can. And it's I love how they make it like we're a lesser sex. It's not what it's about.
Yeah, it's adding your own narrative to what the actual situation is.
I think if you've ever seen the film The Red Pill by Cassie J.
That is such a good film.
Which is a very good film. But she has a video diary where she talks about her journey through the men's rights movement and what her thoughts are along the way. But she has an interesting thing she has her own YouTube channel, and she does sort of extra tidbits, which are sort of the footage that didn't make it into the ending film, but is still relevant. And she did do this one interview as well, where she talks about how whenever she made a statement or heard a statement, she would tack on whatever her presupposition was about that particular statement on top. And it's fascinating, and I'm sure all people do it, but it's really it's being aware of when you're doing it and so on, and when you're not. So so we have Sarah from Canterbury, who is now 77 years old and had her bottom touched in Italy at age 12. It was expected and accepted when you went abroad. You were subjected to bottom pinching. I think that says more again about Italian and culture.
Well, it says about the time
and
period
of the time
as well.
period than now. And the feeling of discomfort and tension. We ran the gauntlet of catcalls and shouts, especially past building sites. Again, when was the last time you walked past a building site with the stereotypical sort of wolf whistle, catcall, and that sort of thing? I'm curious. Because naturally, I don't get catcalled and wolf whistled by builders very often. You see,
outside.
Yeah, but I have builders in my family, and my dad was a builder. He was a contractor, so he had his own crew. And once his daughters got to the point where they were attractive and no longer jailbait, we were not allowed to go to the job sites. He was like, I don't want you around even his own workers.
Fair enough.
So yeah, there are places where women probably shouldn't go.
Well, goodness me, Liz, but the it's not very progressive.
Catcalling definitely does happen, and some of it can be really strange. Like the strangest time it's ever happened to me is at Waterloo Station. And there's this guy, he's actually really good looking, really dressed really smart. And then he said something quite loud to me, but I didn't quite make it out what he said. And I was like, oh, what did he say? And he's like, oh, nice legs. And I was like, oh, you kind of ruined the romanticism there. I thought he was going to say something, I thought he was going to, it's like some sort of old style, he was going to woo me kind of thing. And it was just like, nice legs, love.
He was going to bend slightly to the side, produce a rose between his lips, and invite you for coffee.
Exactly.
But the
Wait, sorry, I just realized I probably miscommunicated there. I meant there are some places girls shouldn't go if they want unwelcome attention. I'm not saying you're in danger on going to job sites.
Yeah.
And it's certainly true that to a certain degree, certainly working class culture has different etiquettes and civilities than sort of the academic caste, as it were. So
most of them,
what they say, what they think. They won't be eloquent about it particularly.
Yeah, they're not going to attack a woman. They're not going to be polite about how attractive they find a woman.
Again, catcalling and that sort of thing. As much as it can, it's again for shock value in a way, or to show off the mates. And there's no way, it's not considered to be I guess a legitimate pulling technique. No guy is screaming out, nice tits out the back of a van. Expecting the woman to come up to him and go, "Oh, thanks for noticing." Service.
You say that, but think about I think about scammers. Scammers will send out pretty ridiculous emails. Their grammar is terrible and everything. One of the ideas could be, and this was suggested, that the only people who will respond are people who aren't that bright, who are going to fall for the scam. It could be that men who are catcalling are doing so because they know the only girls who are going to respond are the, for lack of a better word, sluts who are willing to sleep with them with no repercussions. Well, so it could be essentially a phishing technique.
I would have to see the literature on that, but I see no sort of societal impetus for that really happening.
I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying, hey,
you're saying maybe. You're throwing out a hypothesis. Well, there you go. Can you tell that I've been doing statistics recently?
Nice. If you need help with that, that was part of my major.
Oh, the joy! I will have a chat to you after this, Liz, definitely. But let's move back on. But yes, she complained when she complained about not being able to walk down the street comfortably in a relaxed way. She was told it's harmless. No one's going to attack you, but it was incredibly unpleasant. The harassment stopped when she had a baby. You wonder again how much of this is a product of the times, and the
And
sort.
how much did she let herself go after she had the baby?
Also true.
I'm sorry, but
you're
most guys can't tell you've had a baby if you get back in shape afterwards.
You're just a very mean woman, a cruel woman. That's what it is. So here we have a more recent example. So we have Aggie, 22, from Bristol, who was stalked by 2 different men in 6 months. Who reported the first instance, was not satisfied with the response. I was told to try and avoid my usual route to and from work. I still feel vulnerable. And she felt that she was being stared at on the bus and knew that the man was going to follow. She got off. He pretended to go a different way. I made a beeline for the nearest shop, hoping to lose him. He saw me, followed, and I had told the staff I was being followed. And then they walked her to work. Now, that's horrible.
Yeah, I've had something like that happen to me.
One of those really nasty things.
This is why you need concealed carry in your country.
Yeah.
Liz, trust you to turn this into a gun control debate. Thereof. But there you go. She says, what can I do to defend myself? Carry a handgun. When the police won't defend me, society is telling me to be more vigilant and to change routes so that I am not so much of an easy target. Now, that's one way. But you go. It says men harass women have no repercussions. Well, I don't think
that's not true.
That's demonstrably false. If this person's caught doing it, they could be arrested and charged.
Yes,
it's like if she'd
wandered into, let's say, right, Sadiq Khan didn't create 300 new anti-online harassment officers or whatever they're called, and instead put more bobbies on the beat. Right, so there are more police around, and this woman had, instead of having to go into a private business and rely on the help of those people, had been able to run into a policeman or a policewoman and explain what was going on. This could have been avoided. This could have been dealt with in more of a legalistic manner, where there are repercussions that are more serious. And then, but if a man is caught doing anything of the sort nowadays, in particular, if you've got any way of charging them, properly. So what this is more of an indictment of our policing system than it is of what happens, because when a man is caught for this, he usually loses his job. If he's done something particularly serious, full-on sexual harassment or even up to rape, etc., then this stuff doesn't go away. These people do get dragged through the gutter, even if no conviction is made. The allegation is so scarring. Now, there can be many arguments on what can be done in order to do that, but
once again, if I can jump in and play devil's advocate,
absolutely.
If this is a man who is, say, low class, doesn't have a job, then he's not going to care about his reputation. So the idea that, this is going to destroy his life, not necessarily. If he doesn't have a life to destroy, it's not.
No, I would agree about that, but they do tend to be more of a societal ostracization, right? Which comes from the fact that everybody knows who he is now, in that area in particular. Particularly areas with strong community links will 100% know exactly who this person is. He will be refused service in businesses. Even if he's got no job and he's living off state benefit or whatever, people won't sell him food and stuff like that. And he will be forced out effectively. One of those things which happens, which is obviously very problematic when it happens to be a false allegation. However, there you go. Aggie will soon be using her bike, despite it taking her much longer to get to work. That's a shame. Solomon Victor's $1.99. Thank you, sir. Response to Flasher: it's like a dick, but smaller. Very good. Gemma from Amesbury, age 30, in Wiltshire, describes feeling threatened by young men who follow her while she's running. A van came up beside me and stopped in the lay-by. I thought the men were asking for directions. When I approached them, they were just staring at me.
Why would you approach them?
Because you thought they were asking for directions.
If they haven't said anything, why are you approaching them?
There's only people who want directions are like, hey, could you help me out? I'm trying to find here. Yeah, they'll make it known they want directions. They'll not just sit there and wait for you to be like, oh, you're just pulled up. Can I help you? You want directions, right?
I mean, she's
what's this crazy woman want? We were just parked here. Why is she shouting about directions to us?
I mean,
that's probably why they were staring. It's like they just pull up, they park, and this beautiful woman comes running over to them like, what? I'm joking, but seriously. She's an idiot.
She's clearly an optimist. Let's put it that way.
She's an idiot. You don't go up to strange vehicles. Anyway.
They were calling me. I swore at them. I should be able to go wherever I want to go.
If they were curb crawling you, why did you approach the vehicle?
Anyway, after feeling shaken up and angry, she said she's much more wary of people now. Now, does this say they were following her when she was running, or that like a random group of really creepy dudes in a van turned up this one time? Right? That doesn't.
It says a van pulled up. She approached them.
Yeah.
And they were staring at her. Why would you approach them?
Yeah,
strange.
Oh my goodness!
His vehicle, stare at her, wait for her to say something because you don't wait to say something. It's very strange.
Don't approach strange people. Just don't.
There you go. I love how this is like at this point, and then we go and we move immediately to someone who is not this person. This isn't Gemma, but she's not deserving of her own headline apparently. Tanya in Malta says she is self-conscious when she also goes for a run in Malta. And says, I know I will be beeped, shouted at, whistled at, stared at, even if I'm wearing baggy clothes. Creepy older men say sexually aggressive things to me as I pass them. I hate the way men can do whatever they please, but I am made to feel that the responsibility of their actions is mine.
Who's making you feel that way?
Herself. And it's that sort of like, does she feel she's not going to be taken seriously? Why? Has she ever tried to be taken seriously?
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, they need things like this. Like, if people are being genuinely like harassing you, report it.
Particularly if it's constant, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will again point out this is Malta, so this isn't UK, even though we own it. But
well, and again, jumping into not exactly play devil's advocate, but offer a different position. Oftentimes, when women say that, I'm made to feel that this is my fault. They're talking about family members. Stop it! Sorry, he's being annoying. I have a sister who is very, very attractive, and she would dress not provocatively, but just pretty much anything she wore looked gorgeous. And my grandmother, who was very old-fashioned, would in slightly nicer ways tell her she looked like a slut. And whenever she would get attention that she didn't want, my grandmother would just blame it on her, saying, oh, well, if you didn't dress like that, you wouldn't get whatever. And she felt bad. And so, I would tell her, honey, this is not your fault. No, if people say things you don't like, that's not your fault. So I think to some degree, women, you need to know yourself. And if people are making you feel bad, well, ask yourself, do you deserve it? And if you don't, then don't listen to them.
Just is your dragon harassing you right now, Liz?
He's just being,
What's his name?
He's adorable.
I didn't name him, so he's got a really cheesy name for a dragon. Yep, but this is Blaze. Actually, Blaze,
look at him.
Oh, hey.
Oh, he's so big.
He likes my keyboard because it lights up. But the problem is he'll type things.
I love lizards. They're so cute.
Well, I have a baby here too. Here.
Oh, you got a baby wizard.
Let me get she's kind of in a. Hey, come here.
Oh my god.
She's shedding. But here we go.
Yeah, you're presenting to everyone there, Liz.
Look at her.
So satisfying.
Look at her face.
Say hi, baby.
Oh, she's so cute.
And
how old is she?
Let's see, May. So she's about 5 months, 5.5.
Oh.
Since Goen is going mental in chat, going, the lizard people are coming.
Britishers said that because this little girl, she loves to watch the Britishers streams. When watching, she'll stare at the screen. She's mesmerized. I think it's the colors. So I posted an image on Twitter to let him know, and he said, "Oh no, what is Alex Jones going to say? The lizard people are on to me."
Amazing. I've sidetracked us all there. Free the lizard. I want to pet it. Illuminati confirmed. Lots of that. There you go. Liz establishing dominance there. There we go. So we've just got two more perspectives, and then I think we'll probably draw to a close. But here we go. We have grabbed at 75. Despite being, in her own words, invisible, Sarah in Canterbury. Is this the same Sarah? Like from earlier in the thing, 77-year-old.
You're not showing the article anymore?
I am not. One second. There
just
we
put
go.
the lizard back up. It's fine.
It's fine. No, here we go. So we've got Sarah in Canterbury is 77 now. And then down here, we've got Sarah in Canterbury again. So they've got the same person, but they're sort of split her up for some reason.
It is a bit convenient that they just so happen to have two Sarahs in Canterbury
around the same age, yeah. Right. Identical twins and very confused parents. But despite being, in her own words, invisible, Sarah in Canterbury was harassed in her 70s. Someone laid hands on me. He was drunk or on drugs. Luckily, a crowd of young people outside a bar pulled him off. I didn't call the police. I didn't think about it at the time.
Was that really a woman thing, though, or
is that a drugged up nutter? And no, she was also saved by a group of young people. It wasn't a group of young women. It wasn't a group of young men, but young people, which says something about what people in general are like compared to what nutters are like.
Yeah, I think that's got more to do with drink and drugs than it has to do with sexism.
100%. 100%. I don't think it has anything at all to do with sexism. I think it has everything to do with a confused and disturbed individual who was drunk and
That's
on
not
drugs.
to say that it wasn't frightening for
absolutely not.
A woman for that to happen, but I don't think it was because she was a woman.
Yeah, and the whole tone of this art, well, it may have been because she's a woman, but it's also because of the drugs, right? And it's one of those things where the whole tone of this article seems to be about the fact that it's trying to make out that harassment is prevalent and accepted in our society, which it isn't. It isn't.
If it was accepted, then a group of people wouldn't have helped her.
No one.
Like, oh, well, look, that's normal.
No one reading this article is going, God, I don't know what they're complaining about. God, it's just, they deserved every bit of it. Oh, wouldn't it be fun if we went out? Do you know what, Jimmy? Let's go out and let's go harass some women now. Like, no one's doing that in that way. We're deconstructing it and saying there's a narrative being pushed here, but we're not saying that what has happened to them hasn't been scary and it's not been damaging or it's not been
some of these some of these things in here. Some of these things in here have actually happened to me. I know that I'll probably have some radical feminists be saying, "Oh, but you're just a trans woman, you don't count." So it's like, well, actually, this stuff has happened to me. I've had someone try and follow me. I've had people say sexual charged things at me in the street. I've had some quite weird people do weird things. This stuff happens, but to say that this is something which is accepted in by the general population is blatantly false. Every single time I've told people about these things, they've always said, that sounds awful. I can't believe that happened to you. I've never once had the only person I know who after telling them I got followed by someone actually said oh, that sounds like a really good thing, was a woman. Bear in mind, she was completely spherical, very ugly person. And she was saying that because she just wanted, she wanted that kind of attention. But yeah, imagine there's a perfectly round person, completely.
I'm thinking of the people. I can't help but think of the people from WALL-E.
Pretty much, pretty
the
much.
big blobby people.
Yeah, and so she doesn't get any kind of attention from men. So when I was complaining about this, because it was a very weird thing, I was walking to work. This guy walks past me, says hello. I stupidly said hello back to him. I carry on walking for a few minutes, and then he appears in front of me, which I have no idea how he did it. And then he like just comes right up into my face and asks me, like, says, I can't even remember exactly what it was that he said, but I just told him to fuck off. And then I started seeing him more and more, and he would kind of follow me a little bit. And like whenever I see him, it is really, really uncomfortable. And then I mentioned this on social media, and then she's just like, "Oh, what are you complaining about?" I would have said, I would have been really, really flattered if someone did that to me. And I'm like, well, yeah, you would have flattened them in return.
All you need to do is turn her head and roll over.
Actually, never mind, madam.
Well, I think sometimes you say that, though, to make someone feel better. I mean, my one sister that I mentioned, who is incredibly attractive, she would complain about it, that she didn't like all the attention she got from men, all the unwelcome attention. She would get catcalled. And so trying to help her feel better, I would say, well, I can't remember the last time I got catcalled. I mean, at least men think you're attractive. And she's like, yeah, that's true. Okay.
It's one of those.
Yeah, you kind of see where you're coming from.
It's a double-edged sword. It's one of the primary differences between the male and female typical experience, where women get too much attention or can get too much attention, and it's very true that they can get. It's very wearing. You can imagine that you've always got a spotlight on you, and at the same time, the majority of men, unless they make an effort to be social, can go through life being completely invisible if they so wished, and it's very difficult for them to, I guess, sort of appreciate what it's like to have too much attention, and at the same time, a lot of women can't appreciate what it's like to have no one ever talk to you ever. Unless you again, this is why some people theorize that there are more male comedians that are considered funny, because it's a coping mechanism, because you need to have something above and beyond yourself which makes people want to talk to you, etc. So it's one of those interesting things.
So men need to have a personality, basically.
Or it's more of a requirement, as I say, to just get by, and so on and so forth. I love how many people in chat are like, oh, that got me in the feels. I'm like, okay, didn't mean to speak to anyone's personal experience here. But here we have our last perspective. So we have IB. What kind of a name is IB? But there you go. IB's 14-year-old daughter started her work experience at Canary Wharf in London, and it was only a matter of days before she mentioned unwanted attention. She called my wife, complaining of adult men in their 30s who kept wolf whistling and making comments to her as she left the station. She was upset and confused by it. It makes me really ashamed as a man who we are honestly powerless to do anything with men who demonstrate such disgusting behavior and feel it's acceptable. I would bring that up with Canary Wharf staff. It's all going to be on camera. And
what race were the wolf whistlers?
Well, you had to bring race into it, didn't you? No,
I didn't. It isn't. If this is constant and nobody's doing anything about it, just tell me what race they were.
Well, that's not mentioned here, so I would not like to. I would not like to make any suppositions.
Okay.
There you go. So here's what to do if you're harassed. Here you go, ladies. You take this on board. Ready? An international movement tackling harassment. Hollaback says there is no right or wrong way to respond. Very decisive. Very decisive there, right? It says the most important thing is to get yourself out of the situation if you feel unsafe. But if you choose to speak directly to the assailant, it offers the following advice. Be firm. Look them in the eye and denounce their behavior with a strong, clear voice. In a righteous manner, right?
Be gone.
Be gone. You shall not harass. Say what feels natural. So, as you say, tell them to fuck off. And don't be apologetic. Don't engage if they try to argue with you or dismiss you. As tempting as it may be.
The first two are telling you to engage, and then the third one's like, don't engage.
Like don't engage beyond basically telling them to go do one, right? So they're saying they may wish to engage you in further conversation or make fun of you or dismiss you. As tempting as it may be to get into a verbal war, it's not recommended. This may feed their abusive behavior, particularly if they're doing it for a reaction, I guess. Particularly if they're, as you say, the dregs of society who women never talk to and who aren't concerned with their reputation, Liz, this is the most interaction they've had with a woman. This could be they may misconstrue this in many ways. And once you've said your piece, keep moving. Harassers do not deserve the pleasure of your company. Interesting. I mean,
Mark,
that's quite situational, personally.
The chat is saying it's still on me. Can you see?
Oh, probably. I don't know why. Okay. There we go. How about that? I think it's because I had you selected in Hangouts because you were presenting dragons, right? So congratulations, you've had your 15 minutes of fame there, like just going on. It's a very bad idea to just say something that causes them to dump adrenaline rather than get it up. Very strange.
And I would say, I don't know about the UK, but at least in the US, if you're walking down the street and someone is making you uncomfortable, one of the best things to do is look them directly in the eye and just smile. Or not smile like invitingly, but just kind of as a method of saying, I have acknowledged you, I see you, I recognize you, and I can identify you in a lineup if necessary.
Is this the concealed carry smile? Is that what you're going for?
To some degree. But if a man actually wants to hurt you, he doesn't want you to be able to recognize him later. Because if he commits a crime, if he assaults you, if he rapes you or something like that, if you can identify him in a lineup, he's not likely to get away with it. So if you make eye contact and you let him know, I recognize, or I see you, I know what you look like, and I can identify you later if necessary, they're more likely to just move on to somebody else. If they do actually have bad intentions.
Speaking of harassment, Liz, you've been harassing one of the members of the chat, apparently.
Have I?
So Skoen donated 50 kroner to tell me this, so you can tell he's serious. And said, "Based Liz, you atted me saying, I suppose it would depend on the size. This is clearly sexual harassment committed by a woman." So there we go.
We were talking about pepper spray, and I said that pepper spray is more difficult to carry concealed than a pistol. And he said, well, it depends. Or he said some of them are very small. And I said, okay, I admit it depends on the size.
There you go.
So, yes.
That was not like story.
Some of the chat are saying T-pose to establish dominance. It's like, try the Tory power stance. Do you know what T-pose is, Liz?
No.
It's a thing in animation or video games where like it's a character model before it's been animated, and they all stand with their arms straight out to outstretched to either side in a T-pose, expressionless, with their legs together. It's very strange, but yes, to the T-pose because it confused them. Sora Sapien donated £5 through Super Chat. Thank you, sir. It says, "Aren't we all just internet explorers?"
Aww. That's nice.
It is nice. I don't know whether or not he's actually making a dig at us because Internet Explorer is a terrible browser. But there you go. And Joe Neverton finally donated £2 through Super Chat and said, "I want the NHS abolished so Corbyn will explode." I mean, the two are not mutually, the two are not intrinsically linked. I mean, you could just make one happen, either or, you know, and one of them is going to be considerably easier. So it's up to you. Good luck. Grief. I am not endorsing anyone making Jeremy Corbyn explode. I just want to say that.
Just get it on camera.
But there you go. And on that note, we are coming to the end. So thank you very much for joining me for the women's edition of Fake Accents Unite. As I say, it's a terrible shame I couldn't replace myself with Sarah, but perhaps another time.
I'm disappointed.
There you go. Thank you very much to my guest this evening. Thank you, Discordia.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to Base Liz.
Thank you for having me also.
And thank you very much to Rose of Dawn.
A pleasure as always.
It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much to chat for turning up. Thank you to everyone who donated today, and have a great week. Joe Neverton last second says, "Too late. You've endorsed me for £2. Thank you, sir, and good night."